Hi, and it's another episode of Hot Off the Press, the show about new releases and the authors that bring them to you. And I'm going to be your host, Jim Nettles, but let's see who all has joined us to add to that to-be-read pile. So, Chloe, you are up first.
Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. I'm Chloe Archer, and I'm super excited to be here tonight. I am a new author, and I write very super geeky, zany, funny, lighthearted sci-fi and paranormal rom-coms. And I'm going to tell you a little bit later about my very first novel, which came out about a month ago, and it's called It's Not Unusual to Be Loved by an Alien.
Maggie.
I'm Maggie Blackbird. I write romance starring Canada's Indigenous people, historical and contemporary, male, and male, female. I reside in northwestern Ontario, and my internet always tends to go out all the time. So I'm hanging in tight here, and hopefully I can finally finish a session on new releases. I fell out of the other one.
Yeah, we lost you a few weeks ago, but you're back and you're going to be with us tonight because it's DL that's going to have the problems. I know. Scott,
hey,
you're up.
Yeah, I'm J. Scott Coatsworth, and I write science fiction, fantasy, sci-fantasy, magical realism, and a bit of romance, and all these kind of pretty things over here. I also run Other Worlds Inc., our publishing arm, and we do a couple anthology series, and the new release I'm going to talk about today is from one of those series.
Kaje?
So, hi, I'm Kaje Harper. I write across most of the subgenres. And I was crazy enough to have had 3 new releases and a new audiobook out in the last month and a half. So I will talk about those on this show. So thanks for having me.
Amanda?
I'm Amanda Meuwissen. I know that is not even remotely how my last name looks, but it's Meuwissen. I also am an romance author across subgenres, though primarily fantasy, paranormal, sci-fi, a little horror, once in a blue moon, maybe contemporary. And my hot off the press was this last Friday, September 30th, kicking off the spooky season, Gardening with a Ghost. Very excited to tell you about it. And it's the first of my back month after month through the end of the year release schedule. So just the start of a long 2022.
Wally?
Hi. Thanks for having me. My name's Wally Quigley. I am an author of transgressive and horror fiction. I consider it a success if somebody reads one of my stories and they send me an email and ask me if they really just read what they just read. My new release is Chaos 7. And I'm here to promote that. So again, thanks for having me on the show and nice to meet you all.
DL?
Hi, I'm DL Wainright, and I write dark, creepy stuff that has a lot of folklore and mythology and diverse characters and LGBT rep. And the 4th book just came out. Yay.
It's about time.
Right.
So, Marisa.
Hi, I am Marisa Wolf. I write science fiction, fantasy, any little corner in between I can get my hands on. And I have also had 3 releases in the last 6 months, which is bananas, Kaje. We should talk about this. I'm only going to talk about one tonight, though, and that is World Enders. So it'll be fun.
So let's talk a little bit about the stories. Let's give everybody kind of a little bit of an idea of what they're going to be diving into. And Maggie, I'm going to let you go first since you keep getting bumped. So let's find out a little bit about that to be read.
It's called Back Where You Belong. It's released through Ecstasy Books, and it is a male contemporary romance set in a northwestern Ontario First Nations community, starring a Ojibwe male lead and one who is half Ojibwe and half Swedish. And it's a second chance romance. And 15 years after they broke up, they are now reconnecting, and one does not trust the other.
Can't imagine why. Recycling's always a bad idea. Scott, how about you? What are we bringing tonight?
Sure. So I'm going to be doing the Queer Sci-Fi Flash Fiction Anthology. This is our 9th contest and our 8th anthology because the first one only had 15 entries, which is not enough for a book. So I'll be talking about Clarity, which just came out about, at this point, a week and a half ago. And it's 120 flash fiction stories, maximum 300 words, spec fic, and LGBTQ.
So, Cage, tell us a little bit about what are we going to be falling into for that to be read pile?
So I have a contemporary. This is Alec. It's a shared world single father's story with kind of a grief and loss theme. My book that came out today is Hidden Blade, which is another shared worlds. This is kind of rock star, but my guys aren't actually stars. It has some social anxiety and coming out components to it. A month ago, or a little over a month, I brought out my Paranormal, which was in the 6th book in my series. It's called Consumed by Fire. It's my Necromancer series set in kind of an alternate 1960s US with ghosts and necromancers and demons. And I had an audio out with the amazing J.F. Harding of my mystery series, and the one that just came out is Homework, which is the 3rd book.
So now we're really stacking people's piles up to be read tonight. Amanda, what are you bringing to us?
So Gardening with a Ghost is part of the Paranormal Romance collaboration, Haunted Love. So 9 different authors came together for this, writing our own separate ghost and human romances, all with that same naming convention. That's why it's kind of that kitschy, cutesy Gardening with a Ghost. So others are Stargazing with a Ghost by Cale Hires, Baking with a Ghost by R.M. Neal came out yesterday, and there's many more still releasing through the end of this month. Mine, Gardening with a Ghost, besides the romance, is primarily a mystery, which was kind of fun for me to get to exercise mystery chops, which it isn't usually my focus. And one of the MCs can bring dead things back to life.
Wally, what are you bringing to us?
So Chaos 7 is an anthology. The first half of it is a collection of poetry I've written from like the past year, and the back half of it is 12 short stories, ranging in topics from a boat underneath a house to like a 1984 ode, if you will, in a dystopian type of setting. And then one is written with me as the narrator. It's kind of a meta type of story, and it's called Earworm. So not to gross anybody out in advance, but there you go. So,
DL.
Okay, so well, since mine is like the 4th one in a series, it kind of is a continuation of the story, but basically the series in general is about the conflict between like one group that wants to keep it a secret that supernatural creatures are like a thing, and another group that wants to bring that truth back to light. And in this book, it's finally revealed to the humans in a rather horrifying and jarring way that yes, these things are real. And so then it starts to explore the aftermath of like what that's going to kind of do, even while like, the keep secret group is doing their best to do like kind of control and be like, oh, it's just a prank. It's just like a promotion for like a horror movie. It's still starting to have like humans killing people, and not just killing people that are actually supernatural things, but using it as an excuse to basically feed into their own prejudices and bigotry and stuff like that. So like an uptick in like hate crimes and stuff like that, where they're like blaming it on those people were monsters kind of stuff. But it also has, because each book has a different character on the cover that it has a focus on. So this one, it's primarily focuses a lot on my favorite character, who is a pan-romantic ace lady, and I love her, and she's very sarcastic, and her name is Ava, and I hope everybody else will love her too. So
Marisa?
I'm just wanting to read all of these books. So World Enders is part of the Four Horsemen universe, which is a shared, primarily military sci-fi world, but a bunch of us will write things that are not as military sci-fi, but have fun in the galaxy. This one I wrote with Chris Kennedy, who is one of the founders of the universe, and it is the story of a young alien whose dad is famous, and so he is trying really hard to break out of his dad's shadow, but he has been tricked and he is put on a fool's errand that has very, very dangerous consequences if he actually doesn't somehow manage to pull it off. So he pulls together a very random crew of deputies. There are a lot of shenanigans, potentially of the world-ending kind. And through this, if he doesn't die, he will grow up. And so it's a really fun story of character development with a lot of action, a lot of shenanigans, and a lot of alien cultural miscommunications, we'll say. So,
Chloe?
Okay. Well, I only have my proof copy, but this is the cover. So it gives you a little bit of an idea. It is a very contemporary sci-fi. So it's one that's actually set on Earth, and it features a sunshiny, super sci-fi loving, geeky human guy who is also a major X-File fan and who is convinced that aliens are here on Earth amongst us. And he and his Gen X stoner uncle who raised him actually happen to track down a secret alien base in the Las Vegas, Nevada desert. And that's when he meets his grumpy alien love interest. He's a humanoid alien, but he has some special secret hidden appendages, aka tentacles. And so it's a story of kind of how they find love together, and my human character ends up working for the secret alien alliance on Earth. That's sort of like Men in Black if aliens were in charge of keeping track of themselves on Earth, not humans.
I really feel the need for a slot machine joke here, but I don't know what it would be. It is Vegas. So let's dive a little bit deeper into some of these tales. Because again, one of the nice things we all like to see is what's the world I'm falling into? What's the scene look like? What's the world look like? You know, what is the world our characters are spending their time in? So Scott, how about you? With some of the with such a collection of stories, what are some of the kinds of worlds that people are going to encounter as they go through The Flash?
Every year we choose a different word to be the theme for the stories. And this year was clarity. And it's every year there tend to be certain things that kind of tracks. So when we did impact, it was asteroids. When we did flight, it was angels. With clarity, a lot of it was kind of either mind reading things or that moment of clarity when something suddenly became crystal clear to somebody. But there were some really cool variations on it. Some of them, there was one where there was a plague that basically turned people clear. And so, they were, so they would just disappear. There was another one that was about, again, about some kind of, well, there's a lot of plague theme ones given the current pandemic going on, that was, all these people just disappeared and all that was left of them was this blue goo. And these people, one kid would go around and collect all the blue goo and bring it back together. And it would kind of make this little community of blue goo people. So there's a lot of like variation in this stuff, the way that people attack it. There's also a great mix of stuff from just like laugh out loud humor to, really scary horror, to just sci-fi, fantasy, paranormal. I'm always impressed by how many different interpretations of the theme that folks come up with when they're met with this challenge, and how hard it is to write an entire story that's not just a scene in just 300 words.
Yeah, that is a challenge. Kaje, tell us a little bit about the world we're going to be setting foot into.
Well, maybe focus on the one that came out today. That's this one here, which is Hidden Blade. This is also a shared world, so there are going to be a bunch of these coming out. I got lucky enough to be the first book to come out in this series, which is all kind of a nice position to be in, because everybody's excited to get it going. But this is the second year for this series, although I was not in the first one. And the focus is a big, and I mean, 60,000, 80,000, 100,000 people rock concert in the Nevada desert, interestingly, and various musicians, bands, etc. And the group title is The Road to Rocktoberfest. So it's about the journey to get there. And in my case, I have a guy in his mid-30s whose band lost one of their lead singers several years back. They kind of crashed and tanked and had to revamp, and they're building back, but they're just not where they want to be. And one night in a cafe, he sees a young man singing with his guitar, some amazing stuff, amazing voice, and then the guy runs out the back and disappears. And he and his drummer kind of look at each other and go, that guy, we want that guy. But it turns out that Cam has some real social anxiety issues. Performing in front of 50 people in the cafe had him throwing up in the dumpster. And so even though he meshes very well with their band and with Eric, getting him on stage in front of 80,000 people is just not going to happen. So the question is, we all want this. It's impossible. Where do we go from here?
Amanda, what kind of a world are we going to be falling into with your characters?
So I mentioned that my main character, Peter, has the ability to give life to dead things, and he primarily uses his abilities on plants as a gardener, gardening with a ghost. But he does this to avoid suspicion. He was promised his mother when he inherited these gifts that he would use them on plants so that he's using them with a little bit more thought. It could be so easy to have this get out of hand with using this ability to give life to people or things that maybe don't deserve it. So that's why he's a gardener. And because of this, he moves around a lot, job to job. He's kind of known, but very much word of mouth, for revitalizing these dying, wealthy people's gardens, kind of out of the way, but gorgeous, opulent places. So the book starts where he has a new job at Bennis Manor, this gorgeous Gothic old family mansion with the sort of thralling gardens from The Secret Garden. That kind of level of insanity of how big and beautiful and how many different types of plants there are. So it very much has that Gothic feel to it, but it's a world where people would have absolutely no idea that anybody would have any abilities like this. So otherwise it feels like our normal world, but there's a little bit of that time capsule level too, because the house is so old. And this home has a family and other staff in it because it's so large too. So immediately gets caught up in this mystery, having to deal with all these people. That really just has that old feel of something that would have been from the time of The Secret Garden, even though it's modernly set. I'm trying to save little tidbits of the right things to say at right times to fit for different questions later. So I don't want to give too much away right up front, right? But obviously, if it's gardening with a ghost, there is a ghost in this too. So you get that also that sort of Gothic feel of the place because you have a ghost haunting the manor as well.
I love, Amanda, how you're being photobombed right now.
By my cat, I know. That's her place. That's where she likes.
Moving around his little ears.
It's
I
not.
know.
It's
I'm
not
sorry.
a show.
That's where she.
It's not a show till we have a cat.
I know. That's her spot. That's where she has to be. And actually, that's a good moment actually for me to sneak in and show something in case you didn't know. I was waiting for the right moment to say it too. I'm in here. I'm one of the authors in here. Mine is Willow's, which is one of the other reasons I really wanted to snag this slot for talking about new releases, because it's hey, I'm in Clarity too, and I bet that's what Scott's going to talk about. I just got my book yesterday. I'm very excited for people to read that too. To give an example, then my setting for that one, it's kind of a similar paranormal universe where it's for most people, the world would just sort of be normal. But in mine, it's someone discovering the clarity of, hey, Fae actually exist in this universe. So I kind of I think my sweet spot tends to be it's our world, but not. And that is true for both my short and my new release. That's the book.
So I love the look of shock on Scott's face.
I know. I was waiting to sneak it in there.
So Wally, how about you?
So it being an anthology, it is kind of a little bit all over. But I would say that one sort of consistent thread through the various worlds that are presented is like a juxtaposition between something that is a bit more mundane with something that is completely outrageous and maybe doesn't go with what's presented in the immediate context. An example of this is a story called Focus Group. It's basically about like a focus group of people that are brought into a room to provide feedback on like a toy or a product or whatever. And because like when you go into those sort of things, like they'll take away your cell phone and like so you can't be exposed to the outside world. And unbeknownst to them, nuclear apocalypse is happening outside. So they're sitting there providing feedback on a toy that's never going to get sold and so on and so forth. So there's that kind of tension there. There's another story too called The Marionette, and it's very much presented like a sort of an ode to Pinocchio. However, it's an allegory for pessimist philosophy like Thomas Ligotti or like Schopenhauer. And so it doesn't really kind of jibe at first, but then when you start to delve into each of the stories, you start to realize that they're a lot more similar, or they actually fit together more than you would expect them to. So I like that kind of subversion, and I like that way of playing with people's expectations and then sort of delivering the knockout blow at the end, so to speak. So there's like 12 of those, and yeah.
So DL, because of course you're now coming in on a fairly heavy series. So let's talk a little bit about the world, and especially the world that now everybody's kind of landing into in this book.
So it is basically like our normal modern world, but it is that everything, and I mean literally everything from all folklores and mythology all over the world, they are real. And like, for example, Ava, who I mentioned, her father is a German immigrant who is a werewolf from Norse mythology, and her mother is a Japanese immigrant who is a tengu from Japanese stuff. So Ava's a very weird mix of things. But so yeah, so like your neighbor could be, a werewolf and you wouldn't know, kind of thing, but could also just be like a really obscure weird thing from some folklore. Like also Ava works with a Uktena from Cherokee lore, and so forth. And I try to be as accurate as possible with all of my folklore and mythology stuff. But yeah, so it is otherwise it's our world. Like a lot of it takes place in the Atlanta area. The fourth book though takes place a lot in London, actually. So Ava goes to London. So but yeah, and so the world that you're being plunked into now is that now you think maybe your neighbor is a horrifying werewolf or something else. So
I'm pretty sure I've got a neighbor that is.
Possible. Yeah.
So Marisa, let's find out about this new little endeavor.
Yeah. The Four Horsemen universe has 88 books in it now, I think. It's little bananas. And so this new series of it is functioning as a new entry point. So, if somebody doesn't want to read 86 books to learn about it, they can just plug in the Phoenix Initiative. And so this is book 2 of that, The World Enders. Chris and I also wrote book 1, The Lion's Pride, which is a different story. So this one, in the Four Horsemen universe, it is near-ish future. The Galactic Empire discovered Earth. Humans realize there are thousands and thousands and thousands of intelligent species. So we're not that special, except most of these intelligent species get to spacefaring by putting violence behind them. And a very small number still will do violence for money. And it turns out humans, some of them, will do violence for money, and so become one of the 40 or so mercenary races. Bad shenanigans ensue, things get built, things get broken, lots of stuff happens. There's a reason things haven't gone very far in the Galactic Empire for a long time, and now those reasons are coming out of the woodwork. And so our young alien, Tald, is a peacemaker on his probationary mission, and so he has to complete it successfully to be a peacemaker. But he has been set up for failure because the powers that be that are behind the scenes that are trying to keep the status quo in the galaxy want to keep the status quo in the galaxy. But Tald, as I said, collects a bunch of other aliens, many of whom are sworn violent enemies. And so there are some issues to overcome interpersonally, and there are places to go and things to do because they are trying to find these world-ending ships that have gone missing. So whether they find them before worlds are ended is the point of the book. So they go all over the place and they encounter a lot of weird things.
You should have put an Apple tag on the world-ending ships.
I mean, maybe track them, maybe keep an eye on them. I don't know.
Chloe, how about you? Let's find out a little bit more about our Vegas trucking alien lovers.
Yeah, sure. So like I said, it's contemporary, but a big part of this is sort of you've got this human entity who initially wants to expose aliens and the truth about aliens to the world, but then shifts to wanting to kind of protect them and realizes why many of them need to be kept safe because many of them are political refugees here on Earth. And so we start to see Vegas through his eyes and like how aliens could actually be secretly among us and hiding out in Vegas, land of wacky, crazy, weird kind of stuff. They'd fit right in many respects. The world is also very meta. So for instance, my main character, he writes this very kind of spicy tentacle erotica space soap opera that's like now on like chapter 120 whatever, and he doesn't realize initially but discovers that while many humans don't read it, apparently an alien visitor to Earth discovered it and now it is all over the intergalactic web, and he has this massive alien fan following who loves his story and his characters, the evil Lord Vardox and Captain Starblade, who have a kind of BDSM sort of ongoing, on again, off again kind of romance and so there are snippets of his story in the book and in each of the books in the series actually as it progresses. So that's a little bit of kind of what you get in my book.
Maggie, let's find out a little bit more about the world that we're going to be falling into.
It's cold, very, very cold. It takes place in the winter. I'm talking minus 38 degrees Celsius. Temperatures I'm used to. It takes place at an isolated First Nations community. Only access is fly-in or the Winter Road. Winter Road is basically a road built on the ice. You drive your truck over it, car over it, take all go through the different forests and all those places. And it doesn't delve too strongly into the culture this time. I wanted to focus mainly on the romance between the two people instead of bringing in the rest of the community. That's usually what I do. But this time it's just the two heroes with a lot of outdoor scenery. One's a radio DJ, has his own internet radio station channel, and there's a lot of requests going on over the air as they communicate with each other through songs, dedications, everything like that. And it was a lot of fun to write. I enjoyed it.
And there's a good reason for the steamy part of the romance, because you gotta stay warm. Well, now let's get into the real part of the story. Because, I mean, what we all read the story for is the characters. Who do we get to meet? Who are we spending time with? Who are we hanging out with? Who's getting in our heads? So, Kaje, tell us a little bit more about who we're getting to hang out with. So, since you've got several, pick a couple of people if you want.
I'll stick with Hidden Blade that just came out. And the two main characters there, the one that was the focus for the story and the reason that I started was really Cam. Cam's the young guy who barely made it through 3 songs in a small cafe. And part of my incentive for writing this story was that I read a lot of all kinds of romance, including a fair amount of rock star romance. And there are a lot of guys who have some anxiety about getting up on stage and so on. But I read a lot of books where they manage to overcome it and really manage to produce that performance that jumps them to that next level. And I kind of thought, well, I have social anxiety, and there are times when I just don't overcome it. And, you know, much as I would love to successfully do something, I just can't. And so my question was, what if we have this guy who has all that talent, and has the anxiety at the level where this is just not going to happen. And he can't will it away, and he can't meditate it away. What does he do? Is he condemned to spending his time putting out these videos on the internet with kind of dark video where you can't even see his face, because that's the only way he feels comfortable, providing people with that music. And then I gave him this counterpoint of the kind of big bearded Viking hard metal-y rock kind of player who has a kind heart, and who actually, much as he really wants Cam to be part of his band, is not the guy to say, hey, suck it up and get out there and do it. And so they both have kind of goals that they want to meet together, and also some conflicting long-term desire of where they want to be, but they are kind to each other about it. And so that's where the romance of the story builds.
So Amanda, how about you? Who do we really get to spend some time with?
So it's all third person, limited to Peter. Peter is definitely the main person that you spend time with. And I wanted to bring up too, does anyone remember the TV show Pushing Daisies with Ned the Pie Maker, played by Lee Pace? Loosely, I got some inspiration from that show, which I loved. For those who don't know, in the show, the character Ned can bring the dead back to life just by touching them. But there are certain rules and pitfalls which he tries to use to help solve murders throughout the series. In my story, Peter has a more fine-tuned version of this kind of ability. He can infuse just a little bit of life, healing things over time. So as he's working on the gardens, it's not so obvious, boom, suddenly rose bushes are flourishing, and it's not, so strange. He wears gloves to avoid accidentally healing people in passing, because sometimes, if he shakes someone's hand, they can kind of feel that little zing, like something's a little strange, like maybe it's an electric shock or something. And over time, if that happens too often, it might be suspicious. He's also terrible at relationships because he's always afraid a partner might discover his gift and not be someone who would be trustworthy long term. So for this, since he gets caught up in everything that's going on in this manner, the main part of the story is this mystery of this family's missing little girl, and the presence of an adult male ghost in the house who he forms a bond with as they work to try to uncover what might have happened to that girl and if someone in the house was responsible. Because the ghost knows he witnessed something, but he's not fully formed at the beginning when you first meet him. It's like he's slowly kind of coming to life himself as he and Peter interact. So he knows somebody in the house had something to do with it, but he doesn't know who. So it's very much a whodunit. So the cast of characters is, the father, the mother, there's an older brother, and then since it's such a big house, there's a cook, a caretaker, and a housekeeper. All possible culprits. And a family cat. But spoilers, the cat is not a suspect, I promise. The cat is totally fine. And of course,
the cat is always
I promise the cat is, I know, right? No, the cat could always be. But of course, the other main character is the ghost, who you eventually learn is Arthur Bennis. It's Bennis Manor, who's a young man from the early 80s, not from the origins of this Gothic house, but from the 80s, which was a lot of fun to write. I didn't want to make him like, ooh, this is spooky ghost. He's very boisterous and full of life for someone who is dead and haunting his old family home. So it was a lot of fun to kind of play with him versus Peter being a little bit more somber and serious because he's been lonely for so long. So it was fun to play off of that. So it's a good cast of characters, but you're primarily spending your time with Peter and eventually Arthur as he gets to know him.
Wally? So who are a couple of characters we get to meet through the anthology?
Sure. So the story that I've gotten probably the most feedback from is the very first story that appears. It's called The Shark That Lived Under a House. And the main character is a boy. His name's Tommy Hightower, and he's like 11 or 12 years old. He sees it's actually a boat that's been painted to look like a shark that the people next door use. They store it underneath their porch. And Tommy Hightower is actually kind of a stand-in for me when I was 10 years old. And it's basically a story that I used to deal with a lot of childhood trauma that I had gone through growing up and when I was a kid. And the metaphor that's sort of at play here is basically fear, like what's going on inside of his house versus the shark that's underneath the house that's right across the way there. And through his own sort of use of his very powerful imagination, he ends up becoming a little bit something more than just a technical. And so, yeah, so that's one of the really compelling characters, I guess. Another one is from a story called Lambs. That's the one that I had mentioned before. It's kind of like a 1984 type of thing. And the character's name is Martha. And when the story picks up, you basically come to understand very, very quickly that she has just gone through the loss of her child. He's very, very young, and being in sort of like a totalitarian state. It's basically a story about how one can find something good or some kind of hope or some kind of meaning to keep going, especially in like a society or a culture like that, where it's so bleak and full of despair anyways. And when you have something like that happen, how does one possibly complete the process of healing and grieving? And, you know, basically what would somebody resort to, or what would somebody do to be able to find something to stand upon and move on? So, and then, like I said, the last story, it's basically me just talking to the reader. And I really went for it and really tried to gross everybody out, right? Plus, I mentioned a Katy Perry song too in the same context. So, speaking of gross, but it's basically characters that are presented with something that's in a very almost unreal like set of circumstances, and how they cope with them and how they deal with it. So
DL, since I know this is one of your favorite characters you've written to date.
Well, I mean, she's in all of the books.
Yes.
But she is one of my. She and this other guy, Ren, are my favorite. Which you'll see a little bit of Ren. But yeah, so I already said there'll be a lot of Ava, but there's also going to be, you know, the other core four, as I like to call them, which are the four main characters of the series. So there's going to be her older brother, who is filled with anxiety. He's kind of like what Kaje was talking about earlier with the performer. They get along, lots of anxiety. And then Jim, who is a human, the only one of the core four, spoiler alert, who's a human, and Lucy, who's going through some shit. And things are not going well for Lucy. But then also in each book, I tend to usually start to introduce some perspectives from other characters too. So, and it's all third limited. And so in this one, you also get some third limited chapters through the perspective of Odin, of Loki, and of a Loa from Haitian Voodoo, who's Kalfu, who is, I don't know if anyone's familiar with Haitian Voodoo, but there's guarding the crossroads, there's usually Papa Legba, and he is sort of the more benign guardian of the crossroads. And then there's Kalfu, who takes over when Papa Legba is asleep, basically. He takes over the nighttime ones, and he's not evil, he's just more mischievous, I guess you could say. So more likely to, you know, open the gates to the spirit world and let bad things through, kind of stuff. He likes to stir stuff up. So you do get some perspective chapters from him as well, and he was fun. So, well, of course, Loki is always fun too. So,
Marisa.
So the main-ish protagonist is Tald. He is a young Salsha. So in the Four Horsemen, a lot of the aliens, I mean, you're learning about them from the human's point of view. So they're analogs to some kind of earth creature. So the Salsha are like giant otters who are very intelligent and spacefaring. But they're also a little too good-natured and innocent. They are new to the galactic stage. And so Tald is the first of his kind to go to the Peacemaker Academy. And that came actually out of the fan group. One of the fan groups posted something and said, hey, how come we haven't seen a Salsha Peacemaker? And so my co-author said, challenge accepted. So Tald doesn't have all the confidence yet for what he might need to make his position work. And he therefore has channeled the media. So he goes to like Old West Sheriff. So, I mean, you can picture like a larger than life otter with like a badge and a little holster and a little vest and cheeks. Anyway, so Teld, he's adorable, but he is also really overplaying his hand because he is super insecure and has been given this impossible mission. So you see him interact with people in ways that backfire because he is overdoing it a bit. And it turns out Old West sheriffs didn't act in real life like they did in the movies either. So it really didn't work for them. It doesn't really work for him. But we get a couple of really fun lines. And it's just really fun to watch him just learn how to actually interact with people and what to do when his ideals are not represented. Like he came from a pretty protected population and then went into this academy. He's like, yeah, the galaxy will operate due to these ideals that I have been taught. And it does not. It absolutely does not. And so he has to deal with that as everything goes horribly wrong around him. And also his newly deputized friends maybe try to kill each other sometimes because that's also what happens in the galaxy. So he has to navigate a lot of tensions inside and outside his locus of control, we'll say.
Chloe, let's find out a little bit more about who we actually get to spend this time with.
Sure. So my book is in dual first-person POV with the two MCs. My main MC is River. He's a young 22-year-old guy, but he has a lot of obsession with things from the 90s and a lot of sci-fi stuff because he was raised by his Gen X donor uncle. He's got a little bit of tragedy. He lost his parents and stuff, but he's very much a sunshiny kind of character, and he makes sense of the world largely through sci-fi. So, a lot of his encounters with the aliens and things he learns all are framed for him in what is or is not true from what he learned from Star Wars, Star Trek, Doctor Who, etc. So there's lots of fun little jokes and tidbits in there for the mega sci-fi nerds who will know every single reference that I make in there with River. And then his love interest is very much the grumpy, more stoic, serious alien. He is a captain in the Alliance of Aliens on Earth, and he is constantly sort of bewildered and befuddled by River's character because he's very much his sort of opposite in many respects, and he shouldn't like him, or he thinks he shouldn't like him because he talks nonstop and he's very extra, as he likes to openly admit, but he can't stop thinking about him. And, he's trying to fight his attraction though, because he had a bad experience dating a human in the past who couldn't accept his biological differences as an alien. And so he's really reluctant about trying again with a human. But River is going to work to convince him otherwise.
So Maggie, let's find out a little bit more about who we're going to meet in your love story.
Yes, Stephen, he's one of the main characters. He's unaware he is suffering from intergenerational trauma from the Indian residential schools and colonization. He was raised by his grandmother. So his background, it was really, really tough for him growing up on the res. And Stephen is the opposite. He was raised in really good family. His dad was Caucasian before he passed away, and he came back home to help his mother, who was Ojibwe, who was suffering from an autoimmune disease. And both find that they have to work past what broke them up in the past. Hudson has too high expectations from people. He has a lot of lack of trust in people. And he's quite a homebody where he doesn't let too many people get close to him. Stephen's the opposite. He's more of a people pleaser. He grew up in a household where he was, always doing things to please his parents, and he has to learn he sits in his mind a lot. He's not very good at communicating his feelings and expressing what he wants. And that's how he wound up a teacher instead of pursuing becoming a radio DJ. He has a big love for music, big love for it. So as the story progresses, they find out they have to overcome what tore them apart in the past if they want to have a future together.
You know, those DJs. So Scott, again, because you're kind of dealing with the short piece fiction, but are there a couple of characters that you get to meet through this that really stand out for you?
There's one I'm going to share, but first I wanted to say, Marissa, you had me at Space Otter. And Amanda, we actually have Pushing Daisies, and if you like Pushing Daisies, we also have Wonder Falls and Dead Like Me on our shelf. You've probably seen both of those. We've seen Pushing Daisies.
Dead Like Me, but what was that other one?
Wonder Falls.
Wonder Falls. I actually have not heard of that one.
It's a sort of Joan of Arc recreation with a woman who works in Niagara Falls at a gift shop, and animals talk to her and tell her things to do.
I will have to look that one up.
That sounds amazing. Yeah.
Also, Amanda, if you saw the flashing on my screen a little earlier, I was opening up my spreadsheet for the Clarity contest, and from your story, I noted simply dark, but I like it. I use the simple. I don't judge because I see the stories, I see who the authors are, but I gave you a 10 out of 10 on my informal judging scale. So I really like your story.
Oh, yay. Well, thank you.
So I thought I would answer this question a little differently. Each year I choose a director's choice story, which is not one of the official winners, but we have the judges each pick one so they can give recognition to somebody who didn't make the top three. And then I do usually one story. This year I had two that I just couldn't choose between. They were so different. This one is called Happy to Help by Allison J. McKenzie. And it is a deliciously creepy voodoo story about a lesbian, assumed lesbian woman. It's a character that had been in love with a woman who's now with another woman. And so it starts out, and you'd think that she would be, cursing her and doing awful things to her with this doll that she has. But I just want to read a real quick excerpt from this story. I made her in the image of you. I used yarn for her hair. I brushed it out and styled it just the way you do. For her eyes, I mixed two different paint colors. I couldn't find your exact shade of golden brown. I put a dot of real nail polish on each finger, that rose color that was your favorite. I made another in the image of your new girlfriend. You didn't tell me about her, but I saw that picture of the two of you holding hands outside that coffee shop we used to go to. I saw your comment that she is perfect. She's prettier than me. I tried not to notice, but I did. I sewed the buttons on her jacket. I thought about the needle, about slipping gently into the side of her head. Dolls don't have skulls. I could reach her brain. I always wanted to try that to see what happens. Always wanted to, but I didn't. And ultimately, it's a story about her helping the girlfriend be okay with her new girlfriend. So this is the kind of thing, you just get these weird, oddball things you never expected to like. I'm not someone who reads horror. I don't like horror. It's not my thing. But this story just grabbed me. So that's I think one of my favorite characters in the book.
So with such a big mix of stuff, we're going to go with one of my favorite questions, just to look at everybody panic a little bit. Is one of the best parts about being a writer, being in publishing, is all the things you get to create, but every time you build something new, you learn something, whether it's the rabbit hole you've tripped over and fell down because, the space otter was laying across the floor, or it seemed like a good idea to do an anthology. What was I thinking? What was the thing that you learned or you discovered, or, whether it was about the story, about the process, or even about yourself as you went through this? So one of my favorite things as an author, as a creator, is the idea of you get to do research. You get to learn things. You get to stumble over things like the big walrus sitting in the middle, the space walrus in the middle of the floor, who is, cuddled up next to the space otter that's got a badge and a gun, or it's got tentacles. So whether it was part of the process because you were creating something new or doing the anthology, whether it was part of the process, whether it was part of the work, or whether it was the writing itself, or maybe even something you got to learn about yourself in the process, what was the one big kind of aha moment or the big fun thing that came out of creating this work? So Amanda, you're up first for this one.
All right. Well, actually, luckily, I thought of it while we were taking a quick break. And I wanted to point out too, because Chloe said, "Oh no, I only have my proof copy." That is what I have too. I hadn't lifted it and shown it yet, so don't feel too bad about that. For me, this was so I work both with publishers, and I've also self-published. I've done it all. This was my first time doing the formatting for my paperback myself. I had never done it before. I'd always had either other friends in the biz, people who were used to doing it. And I really wanted to try my hand at doing it myself. Now, I didn't I can remember when I started a decade ago, my friend who would format for me would just use Photoshop. And I can't even imagine the task, how tasking that must be to have done the way he did it back then. I used Atticus. I found it very user-friendly and fun. And I'm like, I got my proof copy and I'm like, it actually looks really good. I really love it. It made me feel so proud to have actually done that by myself. Because with this one, there were so many little researchy things that were all fun and not necessarily big crazy stuff for the characters or, new things that I learned. It was things I knew, like diving into fun 80s lore like Indiana Jones and stuff. But me learning something about, hey, I can actually do this all by myself was just really cool. So that was kind of my big thing I did.
So Wally?
Well, this was my first publication. So, everything that goes along with doing that, I self-edited, and editing is probably one of the worst things I've ever experienced in my life. I think I would rather pull a molar with a pair of pliers by myself with no anesthetic, but I got through it. And it was, just all the stuff that goes with, getting your first book out there and pretty much doing it all by yourself. But in a larger sense, as far as the stories went, I always thought writing was going to be this whole exploration of imagination and coming up with these characters and, coming up with great metaphors and all that stuff and using words that most people don't use in common speaking, I guess. But I found that a lot of the stories that I ended up writing were extremely therapeutic for me, in terms of, because I had mentioned before, the whole childhood trauma thing. And for me, that provided, I'm reluctant to say safe space, but I would say a better word is a sandbox, to be able to let a lot of those emotions that had more or less been trapped inside of myself or, dealt with in non-constructive ways, and we'll just leave it at that. And being able to put those out on a paper and giving them a life of their own outside of yourself, so that you have, obviously the therapeutic aspect of it comes from, I don't want to say exercising those demons, but being able to process them in a healthy manner and being able to sort of assign an artistic value to them as well, instead of just having them consume you or, basically interfere with your day-to-day or just your interpersonal relationships and stuff like that. So, yep.
Welcome to being a writer. So DL, how about you? What was the thing that you tripped over this time as well?
I guess the thing I tripped over was probably, this is the first time that I did a an emailing list thing for people to find out whenever book 4 was coming out and how they can get a signed copy, which means I also then, this is the first time I had to on my website create a way for them to order a signed copy. So that was a learning experience. Not fun, but I don't think I'm gonna ever do that again, but I might end up having to for the next one. It's just and I promised everybody when they were signing up for the mailing list, because no offense to all of these lovely authors who probably maybe have mailing lists, I know a lot of them use it, but personally I don't like receiving emails from mailing lists, so I promised everyone who signed up, I'm like, this is just for the release, and once it's released, I'm never gonna email you again, I promise. And so that was my big authory thing I had to deal with.
Yes, we've all had that pain.
I love how grossed out you are about it. That I have to write my email for my newsletter tomorrow, so I'll be taking that feeling with me. Like,
but yeah, because then I was also like, oh crap, what if because I mean, I like dealing with the software thingy to try to figure out how to make the email and stuff. I mean, I finally figured it all out. I'm like, oh, it looks so professional and cool. Oh look, honey, look at this. My email looks new, like neat, like a real person made it. But but it just the experience of doing it was just. I have anxiety also, so that didn't.
So Marisa.
Space otters. No.
Space otters. Space otters. How did you figure out? No.
Space otters. I think in this one, I think we had some folks that were out of time. And I don't mean that like figuratively with world enders. I mean like they had been pulled out and like very isolated for longer than should be their lifetime, and they get pulled back into the universe. And that was a super fun thing to play with, but something I hadn't done before. Like, how do you differentiate? They're not point of view characters, so you can't give them like a ton of time on it. But you have to differentiate a little bit. Like they were from a time when things were different for humans. And now they are in a time when things are different for humans. And they're dealing with a space otter. So it was just kind of a fun way to play with like, how would human society change and not change over this period of time? And how can we show that subtly? Because it's not really the point of what's happening here. And our point of view character probably wouldn't notice or care. And so it was just a really fun thing. Like I don't know that I'm a very subtle writer. And so it was fun to try subtlety and to work that in. And I think it worked because we've heard from some readers how much they really like this particular group of people that I am not giving spoilers about. But it's fun. It was fun to try a new kind of method and approach.
So Chloe, being your first time out as well.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I didn't really have to research a lot for what was in the book because I'm also a huge sci-fi nerd. So most of that's just archived in my brain. For me, it was more researching how to self-publish and the things that I needed to kind of know about that. I spent probably about a year listening to hundreds of hours of podcasts and other things, reading books, trying to educate myself. But probably the biggest kind of revelation sort of moment in this process for me was I had the idea for the book. I had started writing it and I kept getting really stalled out. And I attended Inkers Con. I'm not sure if folks are familiar with that, but it's an online, well, they sometimes have it in person too, but it was online during part of the pandemic. And it's for writers essentially. And there were people there talking about dictation. And I had never heard about this really as a form of how to write. And I thought one day, because I was just really stuck, I was like, I'm going to just try this dictation thing. And discovered that I'm apparently a freakish natural at dictation and can go. I don't have any barrier. Like the first time I dictated for 20 minutes straight. And I just kind of went from there. And it fixed what I discovered was I have a bit of an internal editor critic that stops me when I'm typing on the page, that wants to really nitpick everything. And so I find for me, if I dictate and I'm not looking at what I'm writing, I just make sure it's recording and I can actually produce. And I basically wrote 100,000 words in book 1 through dictation. I've written 115,000 word book 2, and I'm on book 3 now. And I'm dictating first draft. I do type in the edits, but the first draft is almost entirely dictation, and it just works for me, and I get much faster, better word count using it. So it was kind of one of those mind-blowing moments where I was like, this is next level for me in terms of being able to actually finish and keep going with my writing. So that was great.
Is that like a text-to-speech thing, or you just like record what you said and then type it up later?
I use the app otter.ai. More otters are coming in here.
Nice.
But they have a free version. I'm now on the paid version because you get more minutes each month. But it was originally created for like meeting minute notes.
Yeah, I have it on Zoom for work.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, you can use the app on your phone, and I can go for walks with it. I can do whatever. And it will record for a set length of time. So you do have to kind of watch if you are likely to go over 30 minutes or whatever in one individual go. And the cool thing about Otter is that like it not only turns your dictation into a transcript, but it keeps the audio copy for you. So if it had any issue, like understanding what you said, you can go back and just listen to yourself in the excerpt and go back and like manually correct it. It's different from Dragon. It doesn't have like commands for like open quote, close quote, comma, period. But that kind of stuff would slow me down more. I'd rather go back and do it after. For me, it just works much better to do that. And so that's kind of how it works. And I love it.
So Maggie, how about you? What'd you learn from doing this one?
This was actually a short story. It was about 15,000 words, and I had just kind of threw it aside and thought, well, I'm going to build on this, and I'm going to turn it into a 50K novel instead. And it was a process because I found I had to go back and rework a lot of the chapters, and I never did that kind of revision before, and I hated it. I found out I don't like doing heavy revisions, but it did need it. I had to also make sure the character arc was proper because I had made changes to some of the plot and everything. So yeah, so that was fun. Fun, not really, but it came out good.
Scott, what'd you learn putting this one together?
So it kind of has been a process throughout all of these. We do the two series. We do the queer sci-fi one, and then we do the Writers Save the World series, which is about tackling issues like climate change and social, societal issues and things. There's two basic ways to do an anthology that I'm aware of, and one is that you just basically do a Kickstarter and you raise a ton of money, and then you have to come up with all kinds of cool giveaways and levels and things, and it takes all this time and energy and stuff. Or if you don't do it that way, you can basically put it together and watch your costs and then really promote it and try to make your money back that way. And we take the second path because I really have not gotten into the idea of like having to come up with like mugs and extra short stories and whatever else they have to do with Kickstarter. So what I've learned a little bit each time is ways to make it a little more economical to do it. I started doing my own covers a few books back in the QSF series, and that saved a lot of money. And what my current learning thing is, I met a woman called, her name is Marion Rich. She goes by she or they, but we use they just to be safe. Do a lot of stuff in the horror market and magazines and anthologies and stuff, and have organized everything through Google for submissions. And so they've got a Google form that you submit the information to. It's got all the required fields. You've got to put in certain things that they need. And then it also takes the manuscript through that. So it then generates a spreadsheet on the back end. With the flash fiction one, we started out with 15 entries the first year. Last year, we had 375 entries. This year, we had 312, which wasn't quite as many, but it's a lot to go through and put every single one manually into the sheet and deal with. So what I'm learning now and hoping to pull forward into this year for both series is to set up that as a more automated thing so that it saves me more time and makes it ultimately work a little bit better.
Paige, looks like you're bringing in the close on this one. What did you learn?
Well, I probably learned more from a couple of the other books than the one I've been featuring. I mean, my Consumed by Fire is set in the 1960s, so there was a lot of historical research going with that. For Alec, I had a guy who lost his son and was so the balance of grief and a romance and not shortchanging either of those emotional states. But for Hidden Blade, was my first alternating first-person novel. I've done alternating first-person short stories on my Facebook group where I do a short story every week, so just for fun. But this was the first time I'd done a novel, and I found out it's really nice as far as pronoun confusion. Certainly helps a whole lot to have an I and a he in particularly those more romantic scenes. And then I had a lovely family member, Beta, reading it for me for the music part because he is a musician and recording artist and does some of the tech side. And I counted up the number of times that he told me that musicians do not have chords, they have cables. And so by about the 10th one, he was just putting a little exclamation mark next to it. And, so I got to fix all of those. It was kind of fun, although he did come back and tell me that people of his generation do not swear the way that I had my characters swear. But he declined to tell me how they do, so the book stayed the way that I wrote it.
Well, guys, it looks like everybody's got a lot of stuff to stack into that to be read pile. There's something for everybody this time. But before we get out of here, let's make sure everybody knows where to find you guys and where to find that latest work. So let's make sure everybody knows where to find those websites, social media, and of course, let's make sure everybody knows the title of those books. And because there's not an adult in the room, because it's me here, Marisa, you're going first. I'm working backwards.
Woo! Okay. MarisaWolf.net or MarisaWolf.com. I go both ways. If you like books and you like dogs, you can follow me at Instagram at BookDogs. You will see my dogs probably more than my books, but such is life. My newest book is World Enders with Chris Kennedy. You can also check out the Valkyries Initiative if you want my last new release. That was like 2 weeks before it. That's urban fantasy. So all the things.
DL?
You can go to thehollowsun.com. Let me get the book out again. Oh, that's the wrong one. Okay, so like the hollow sun, like the sun in the sky.com, and that will have links for all of my social media stuff. And also I have a YouTube channel if you like folklore mythology where I ramble about different folkloric things. So you can learn, and it's fun, sort of. And so yeah, that's
Wally?
I have just the Facebook page, WP Quigley. It's my author page, and my book is Chaos Heaven. And you can find that on Amazon. And you may have to do a little searching. I don't know what it is. People are like, I can't find it. Put in my name and Chaos Heaven, and there's a slash there too. So then you should be able to find it. And yeah, give it a read. And I'm sorry in advance.
Amanda, never apologize.
I was just thinking that in my head. Never apologize. AmandaMeuwissen.com, Amanda Meuwissen everywhere. If you Google me, see how it's spelled up there, I am the only one. You will not find something else. So it makes it very easy to find me. This book is Gardening with a Ghost. Again, it is part of a multi-author collab, called Haunted Love. All of our books are on Amazon. I'm pretty sure all of them are Kindle Unlimited and have paperbacks. I try to do as much as I can on TikTok and other places, but Facebook's definitely where I am the most. Extra bonus plug to go to Scott, since I also have this one. And one last thing, if you like collabs where different authors are kind of exploring similar universes or trying something different, my next release is retellings of classic horror, mine being the Dracula retelling, A Delicious Descent. I'm one of 11 authors in this one, all doing different classic horror. And again, on Amazon.
Gage.
I'm Kaje Harper. You can find me at kajeharper.com. If you want to chat, your best place is my Facebook group, which is Kaje's Conversation Corner. I do a short story every week there. We do a book review every week and a variety of other things there. You can also find me on Goodreads. I run a young adult LGBT books group over there. My latest release is the one that came out today, Hidden Blade. It's part of a multi-author, The Road to Rocktoberfest 2022. And the other books are coming out in pretty short succession. So the next one is out in a week and one 3-4 days after that. So looking forward to seeing what my fellow authors create there. And I hope people will come by and say hi.
Scott?
Oops. Okay. First of all, I wanted to say we have also one other Clarity author here, I think only one. Kaje has a story in the book as well. The story is called Beneath the Surface. And Kaje, my note to you was, ooh, creepy and sexy. I love the story. So you can find me at jscottcoatsworth.com. It's my main home. I am on Facebook a horrible amount of time. So you can also message me there. I am technically on Instagram, although I never post there. And I'm also technically on Twitter, but I mostly just post there and don't interact a lot. So that's not a great place to find me. I also run queersci-fi.com and liminalfiction.com, which is our kind of mainstream but very LGBTQ friendly sci-fi speculative fiction site.
Maggie?
You can find me at maggieblackbird.com. All my social media links are all there. And you can find Back Where You Belong coming out October 14th at any online retail store.
And Chloe?
Okay. Again, I'm Chloe Archer, and you can find me at chloearcher.com. I'm also on Facebook. I have a reader group called Chloe's Cosmos. And I am on Instagram. Still mostly kind of figuring that one out. I'm also on TikTok, God help me. But I'm still also figuring that one out. So I don't know, don't come in with high expectations on that. But It's Not Unusual to Be Loved by an Alien is available on Amazon in ebook and paperback, and it is also in KU if you want to try it out there.
And I've had the pleasure of being your host tonight, Jim Nettles. You can find me at jamespnettles.com, authoressentials.net, authoressentialsworkshops.com, thespeculative-fiction-academy.com, and of course here at ConTinual. And go stack up those to be read piles. It's that time, and the holidays are coming, so pick up some of these for some gifts too. They'll love them. We'll see everybody again soon.